All right, everybody, we're back. We're back with the Poor Sports Podcast. It was not certain we were going to come back, but we are back. Do you feel any uncertainty in between podcasts that you're ever going to do a podcast again?
Sometimes, yeah. For me, it's like day to day. I've explained this to people before. There was like a really long period of my life, 12 years or so, where I was like writing every day on my own website. I still am on Twitter or X a lot, but there was a point in time where I needed that. I needed to be able to get that stuff out, and I needed the feedback that came from it. And I'm very much not in that space anymore. I don't need it. For me, the joy of this podcast is talking to you.
That's the sweetest thing anyone's ever said to me.
I know it sounds very corny, but I do enjoy our conversations together, and that's why I'm here. And also this very small handful of friends that actually listen to this and want to talk about it afterwards. That's nice of them. So that's why we're here. I think that's the reason why anybody should do something like this. There's so many people that are like, we're doing this because we're going to make it big. And chances are you're not.
Well, you and I are, but that's unrelated to
everybody else can suck it.
Yeah. I think that's not. I do think every time in between. Also because I know that about you. Because at a time I had a similar affliction where I would write. I think I wrote 6 months straight every day. At one point, I made like a commitment to myself and made it 6 months. But then you're like. What I noticed, and you could tell me if you've experienced this also, is you start to put out like very, very low effort content to
for sure.
keep the streak alive, right? It's like when Cal Ripken was in his streak, if he had like gone out, and he might have even had a thing like this, which might be why I remember it, but like play an out and then come out of a game. You'd be like, yeah, I guess like technically the streak's alive, but like that's not really the spirit of the streak, you know?
I bet Cal Ripken's a great example. I bet when he looks back at his streak, there are days he regrets he played. I'm sure there's probably so many times where the whole team went out to the bar after a game and Cal was like, sorry guys, I got to be out there again tomorrow. So I'm just going to go back to the hotel and I'll see you guys in the morning. And he probably missed out on a lot of stuff because he was so committed to that streak. Just like you, there was a point in time where it was a couple years for me where I wrote at least once every day and oftentimes more than once.
Right.
And I regret it at times because it did cost me time doing other things for sure. And that's how I feel now. Like at times, anytime I'm doing a podcast or something like that, it's like there are things I'm missing out on. But honestly, like, it doesn't.
Your child is graduating college right now. Just
already,
so you know.
It's over. She's a genius, as it turns out. But it's just I mean, everybody has competing priorities, and as you get older, there are more and more of those. So it's just a reality. The people that are still, in their late 30s or 40s, like us, as we're approaching 40, that devote like 100% of their time to like endeavors that go nowhere. I'm always amazed by that.
I know.
It is very compelling to me. It's like, what is going on, man? Like, you don't have other things you want to do. I
also think there's a thing now where we've given everyone this mindset that like you can break, never give up. The Jimmy V quote, I think, never give up, don't ever give up. And he was talking about sports blogging. I want to make that clear. He was not talking about cancer research. He was talking about sports blogging. And we've given people that. And I think with the internet, in the internet age, the time between feedback or like creation and feedback is shorter. So give up.
Yeah.
Give up more quickly. Don't stop being creative. But when something's not working and you need it to work to be happy, move the fuck on. You know what I mean? Like the I don't know. I guess like maybe this is because I started basically when I started doing stand up is when I stopped blogging on a regular basis.
Yeah. Yeah. But you were getting your fulfillment through another medium.
Getting fulfillment, getting instant feedback on it. And that's like, I wish we could get that. That's one of the reasons that I keep unsuccessfully pushing for us to live stream, is so that we can have very few people chatting on this, but giving us instant, like when you listen back sometimes, do you ever hear yourself, maybe not you because you're so perfect, but me, I will occasionally misspeak on a way where I'm like, I know that that's not what I was thinking, but it's just the thing that came out of my mouth.
Yeah, I do it all the time. If the
Sure.
few times I've listened back, I'm like, it's usually I started talking about something that I had no business talking about, and
Sure.
then I went down a path where I was very wrong.
You were super pro Trevor Bauer. We had to cut it out, but it was like, wow, that was tough. And then it turned out you were vindicated. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's there's a lot of that going on. I think if we do get to the live streaming, it'll just be a lot of comments on our appearance, because that's what guys
Sure.
do. Guys just comment on other guys' appearances.
There is nothing that heterosexual men love to do more than comment on other heterosexual men's appearance.
That's all you can do. It's the only way you can make yourself feel better from time to time. I mean, even I guarantee you, even like Jason Momoa's friends are out there making fun of the way he looks.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like you long-haired loser. Okay, so in the time that we haven't done this podcast, it's been, I think, close to 2 months. Is that what we determined since we've done?
Yeah, we did one briefly in September, and the old podcast trick. What you got to do is we just call this season 2.
Yeah, this is season 2. We don't know how many episodes were in season 1. I don't know if you noticed there was a big finale cliffhanger at the end of season 1. Which was,
that's the key. That's the key to any. People do that in podcasting all the time. I always find it very interesting that they'll just take a break for an indeterminate amount of time, and then when they come back, they're like, and now it's season 2, and you're like, wait a sec, there's no seasons in podcasting. This is not a TV show.
Yeah,
you can't fool me.
Nobody believes you. So in that time, I was in the Seattle International Comedy Competition and bounced out of the Seattle International Comedy Competition.
How long did you make it? Is there like rounds?
Yeah, I didn't even make it out of the first round. I will say it was it was a good class of comics. This is between you, me, and the podcast listeners. I now have some evidence to suggest I had COVID during the competition, which I was like, it's tough when you have a kid, and especially you have a kid, but not to do the like, I'm a veteran parent, you're a rookie thing. But my both our kids are in daycare now, and they're just bringing home fucking tropical diseases, and we're just sick all the time right now. So it's hard to, what is it? COVID? Is it RSV? Is it just the common cold? We're just constantly, somebody's got snot coming out of their body at every moment of our lives right now. So I did not diligently test. I will say one thing on my behalf that doesn't make me just a filthy COVID spreader is because I knew I was a little bit sick, I did try to not be in like super confined spaces. So I
thought you were going to say I went up on stage in a mask, which would have been hilarious, and probably that in and of itself might have got you out of the first round.
Yeah. That's a whole off the podcast thing. I got a thing to tell you off the podcast. Anyways, but that's no excuse. It was a good crop of comics this year. The last time I did it, there's a big problem with the contest, I will say, and this is going to sound like sour grapes. This is why I knew I shouldn't do it. The moment I arrived the first day, I regretted doing it. It's not because the contest is bad. I think it's actually like, of all the comedy contests in the world, I think it's set up the most fairly, which is everybody gets 4 nights. It's an aggregate score of those 4 nights. You get to drop your worst score. The problem is there hasn't been a local winner of this contest since 2004. And part of the reason I suspect is that a lot of times the judges are local comics who are not really incredibly well qualified. And I'm not talking about anyone in particular. I mean, I am, but I'm not like...
Yeah, it seems like you are.
But it's not... If you think it's you, by the way, like there's comics that listen to this, it's not you. Trust me, it's not you. The person who is in my mind specifically definitely does not listen to this podcast, like for a variety of reasons. Anyway, I mean, like literally, it'll be people who are like not comedy, they don't know comedy at all. It's a wild assortment of judges. And like, I was like kind of middle of the pack the first couple nights, and I was like the third night, I'm like, I'm going down swinging. If I don't want to lose, I don't want to take 6th, the top 5 out of 16 advance to the next round. I was like, I don't want to take 6th. I either want to take fucking 10th or And by the way, that night I took like 14th. Like
So you went with your most racist jokes.
my most racist, most homophobic jokes in the heart of Seattle.
It's like when a dunk contest winner is the NBA dunk contest. You know, you get like one dude who's like, you just know this guy's gonna win. He's so good, and all the other competitors are like, I better bring out my best dunks, or there's no way, and I'm gonna go down swinging with my best dunk.
Yeah,
and then they try it, and it's just a miserable failure.
Yes. So I will say this: the jokes landed with the crowd. But again, it doesn't. The crowd's reaction is only part of the thing, right? So I did. I have a joke you may or may not have seen. It's a joke about shaking babies. I don't want to give too much of it away.
I've heard this joke.
Okay. Oh yeah. I know you. I know you've seen it. So this is a topic that some people do not like to see jokes about. But if I was a critical judge watching a competition, seeing somebody take an extremely dark topic like that and get an entire crowd of people to laugh, to me, that's impressive. But I'm a fucking nerd, and I'm thinking about it from a different perspective than a random dickhead in North Bend who gets asked to judge. I don't know who even the judge was, by the way, in North Bend.
Are these judges other comics, or are they
sometimes
just random people? Okay.
Sometimes they're like theater employees. Sometimes they are comedians' moms. I found out. There's not really. I would say there's not a defined set of traits. Nor, by the way, like a guy that I'm friends with, Greg Beechler, who was the feature when I headlined Bickerson's, and you probably that's probably the time you saw the baby shaking joke. He also didn't advance out of the first round, but he was in the preliminaries the week before me, and they asked him to judge the second round. So it's, by the way, like, this is as the competition's going on, not like they asked him way in advance. So it's not really being chosen way. There's not a lot of thought going into who the judges are, is my belief.
Yeah, they just need people who are willing to show up and sit there for a few hours.
Who will sit through a 2.5-hour comedy show for free, I assume. And it's got to be people who get some sort of rocks off from, because I would not do it. I thought about it. If they asked me, I would not have done it. And
yeah, I mean, you have a family, so I would understand.
Yes.
Like the people that are probably most willing to do this as comics would have to be the ones that just have nothing else going on, right?
Yes,
like,
please.
They have all the time
that to the people who might be offended that I'm bringing this up. You have nothing going on, you pieces of shit.
Here's the thing: I would have to think about comedy, because I think in what I call it amateur sports media. Amateur sports media and comedy have to have a lot of similarities. In amateur sports media, there is just like, it's like everybody's in a competition to be the best amateur sports media person, but there is no competition, and nobody cares. This is not your job. If it was your job, you'd probably be making a lot less money than you'd like, because I know enough about sports media to know they're very underpaid, which is always a shock to the people who tell sports writers that they do their job for free. No, you wouldn't, first of all. And I don't know what kind of notoriety you think comes from doing this, but it's just middle-aged men in your DMs. So if you're a middle-aged man and you want to talk to more middle-aged men, then by all means. But there is so much like pettiness and jealousy in this amateur sports media field.
Sure.
I feel like that has to be somewhat similar in comedy. You have a lot of people that feel probably like they're not getting a fair shake just by existing. And it's like, it's possible that there are people out there who are just better at you than this. They're just better than you. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. Well, and that's going to be, I agree with you. And it's also going to be counter to my opinion that I'm still very good at comedy and didn't advance in this competition.
To be clear, I was speaking directly about you personally.
No, but so anyways, that competition came and went. By the way, Brent Lowry, the winner of that, will be at Bickerson's Brewhouse March 23rd. And bringing his girlfriend, who was also in the competition with him, also very funny.
Wow, two comics dating. That's got to be rough at home. I'm not gonna lie.
I can't even imagine. They both live in Portland, so I don't have to deal with any of their. I didn't even know they were dating until the competition. So, good for them. Anyways, we got to get past the comedy stuff. Although I do have some shows coming up. By the way, March 15th and 16th, save the dates, folks. I can't announce it yet. Tickets aren't on sale yet, but something's going on. The folks that didn't get to see me at 6th and Proctor because my wife was thoughtless
And
enough to just go into labor that
me being one of those people that did
I know
not
the
conceive.
people who've been deprived of my comedy, you might save that date and location. I'll say that.
I thought you were going to be headlining the Tacoma Dome or something like that.
Yeah, it's not the
That's
Tacoma
cool.
Dome. Maybe
That's
next
cool.
year the Tacoma Dome.
Okay, it's a parking nightmare there anyway.
Yeah,
You
that's
don't
true.
want that.
That's true. So we did see we saw the rise and fall, not necessarily since we'd last podcasted, but since we were podcasting on a regular basis, we saw the rise and fall of Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes program. Did I bring up on the last one? Do you remember? I know it's been a long time, but I looked up a ticket price. I looked up ticket prices because it was a big deal. Ticket $600 is the cheapest ticket to the game, and I looked up ticket prices after the first loss, and there was like a precipitous drop. And now I suspect the tickets at the end of the year were probably pretty easy to get your hands on.
Probably not a lot of season ticket renewals going into next year for
Sure.
the Colorado Buffaloes. I don't remember what else we talked about on that one podcast we did in September, but I definitely remember us talking positively about Colorado. Although at the time, I will say, if you said anything negative about Coach Prime or Colorado at that point in time, then you were racist. So
You were.
It
You were.
has
That's
that
the
narrative. It's crazy how that narrative changes once you start losing. It's I actually the craziest thing I saw. I might have brought this up on the last podcast. I don't remember. I saw a sports media person who is half black herself get accused very hard of being racist by
that's
saying
great.
something negative about Colorado, and she's a USC fan and alum. So she was just commenting because they were playing each other, and of course the nation took that as you are racist, and she's light-skinned enough that you cannot tell she is also African American.
Are we allowed to say who this person is, or are you shielding her identity?
She wouldn't be well known enough for people to like know either way. But if you remember back in September,
let's get her on the screen. Let's judge her white passingness or whatever you would call.
It was. I mean, when I saw that, I was like, we've jumped the shark on this thing. We are accusing anybody and everybody who speaks negatively about Coach Prime of being racist. And it's like, that's just not how racism works. I'm sorry. Like, you can comment on a sports team's performance or their coach's performance or a player's performance without having preconceived notions about race. Now, I get it. There are a lot of people that hate Deion Sanders for one reason, and they are racist. But there are a lot of other people that don't feel that way.
I actually think that's kind of an interesting topic because, we probably need to move on to some of the other topics, but he is a guy who, like, I think there's people who think that racism is like the cartoonish racism, where they like Southern Klan members or something like that. That's the only thing that qualifies. And I think he is the kind of guy who inspires a less cartoonish version of racism. People who are being racist but would not consider their opinions. Right? People who like use the word thug only to describe young black men, like these kinds of guys. And I suspect. Yeah. Anyways,
it is very much he whether you like him or hate him, he will bring out the coded racism or the coded prejudices that a lot of people have, and I think the people that have those have a real hard time coming to grips with what it is they're perpetuating every time they speak.
Well, and he's many of the things that I think grind the gears of racists, which is he is unapologetic and like very self-confident and self-assured,
generally successful. I mean, I know the team plummeted after as soon as we talked positively about them, things went way south. They didn't even make a
You know why? Probably because
it's all those racists out there. Things went bad for them. I do think that, I mean, they were a 1-win team last year and they were like a 4 or 5-win team this year. So that's a clear improvement. And I mean, as long as his kids are there, Deion Sanders is going to be there coaching that team. And who knows, man, maybe, a lot of teams, it takes a couple years to make a notable improvement. Maybe that's what happens for them next year.
I will say of his time there, however long it lasts, but the fact that he didn't just come in and take this program who had been struggling, transform it through this massive roster reconstruction and put out like a championship contender if that happened, I would be really worried about like the mercenary coach scenario where Nick Saban wouldn't be this guy because he's 8,000 years old, but like a younger coach who is able to go in and just bring in a mass of talent and completely transform a program and then leave 2 years later with probably these like all kinds of infrastructural problems. Now the season tickets cancel. They're maybe building stadiums or whatever around this idea that this team is a contender now. Just a lot of potential issues with a guy like that being able to come into a program, completely turn it around, and then leave them holding their penises because we're a family show.
The other thing I'll say is for every Dion, there are a dozen like Dabo Swinney types that are doing it the opposite way, which is you come in, you're part of this family, and you can never leave, kind of thing. And if you leave, you're a horrible person, and it's my way, or they basically they have their own version of being a terrible human being. And at least to Dion's credit, he came in and did it his way. And he was just going to do it the way that he felt was best. And for a while there, it did work. But, ultimately it just couldn't carry out through the course of an entire season. So who knows, man? The way college football works now with everybody transferring, I mean, I feel like there's nothing wrong with the way he chose to come in and run his program.
No, I also basically, like, I have a hard time. I got in like a really heated argument with my dad about because I think college football is it's arguably the most, you might hate this too, arguably the most ethical major sport in existence right now, because now that
it's arguably the most that masquerades as ethical, and below the surface probably more unethical than most.
Maybe, but I don't think that there's any of them that are particularly ethical. I think maybe starting with that baseline is important to realize. And to me, I guess the thing to me about sports and their ethics is we've created perverse incentives in professional sports where teams are tanking. And there's no benefit to tanking in college sports, which is one of the benefits of college sports. And now we don't have the ethical dilemma of these players putting their bodies on the line every weekend and not earning something closer to what they're worth. The NIL thing, there's got to probably be some work done to make it. I don't even know what the answer is, because we also have this thing where Cam Ward, the Washington State quarterback, goes and has a pretty good season, and now he's basically a free agent. And I'm like, it's probably what should be allowed to happen.
Yeah. The more NIL is played out, and I totally get where you're coming from, because I've said in the past there needs to be more regulation on NIL. We're really going down a rabbit hole here. That's
fine. We got a 4-hour podcast ahead of us. That's fine.
But it's like you could argue college football, especially, but college sports as a whole right now is the most free market system, because there is no regulation. So like, there's no regulation, there's no salary caps. It strictly comes down to however much you can pay these guys and are willing to pay these guys. That's what they're going to earn, and it creates a lot of inequity for sure. But at the same time, you could argue that is the most capitalistic free market way of doing things, and in some ways, that's good.
I guess to me, it's only an improvement. The inequity that it creates is just because people are receiving, not because people are losing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I guess it's easy for us to say that as Washington fans who are, they're going to find themselves in the upper tier of those teams that can afford to pay players. If you're a Washington State fan, you might feel the complete opposite of us. And I understand that, because this free market system is only going to hurt you. It's only you're the one who is going to experience the real inequity when players like Cam Ward come in, use your school as a stepping stone to launch themselves to a much more profitable, next step, whatever that might be.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about the playoff, by the way, in a little bit, and I think we'll get into that a little bit more at that point. But to me, it's like there's less anti-competitive elements in the upper tier of college football, and we can talk about how it should be structured. I think there are like potential options to make it more entertaining all the way around, better for the players all the way around, etc. But another thing that we basically have missed completely is the rise, fall, and rise again of Geno Smith in a Seattle Seahawks uniform. We came into this season and fans were thrilled, and then we're like 3 games into the season, they want him benched, and now it's just game by game. And even a game where like the game against the Cowboys, there's almost nothing more you can ask Geno Smith to do. And DK Metcalf, by the way, we've seen the rise, fall, and rise of DK Metcalf this year, who I will say, like, this attitude he had where he's like, I'm not going to stop being me, meaning like, I'm not going to fucking try not to commit penalties that crush my team's chances to win, is the subtext that people are reading from it. Those two guys, you can't ask, and people are still pissed at him after the Dallas game. So I don't know what people want.
I still like Geno Smith. I also think that the idea of Geno Smith, the concept that the Seahawks have gone about creating with him, is actually probably it's fine. It's living within the margins and it's zigging when everyone else is zagging. So far,
sure,
in the NFL, there's only been 2 ways you win. You either win with an elite quarterback who's making a ton of money, and he's just so good, he carries the team to victory every time.
Pretty rare that teams do that with a guy making that much money, though. I'm sure you've seen those stats. That
right, but in recent years, the Super Bowl winners have had it. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady
But Mahomes is on an actual pretty team-friendly deal compared to other quarterbacks because he signed the big long one early, the big long one, baby. I have a joke about. Well, we're not going to go down there, but and Tom Brady was taking discounts too, which you shouldn't expect any player to do that, but that's
quote
the reality.
Unquote discounts. They're still getting paid the most.
Now, don't fucking old man me on this topic. You know what I mean? I'm talking about discounts relative to the rest of starting quarterbacks, especially elite starting quarterbacks.
Right. So I mean, there's only been 2 ways to win. You either have an elite.
He's not Mother Teresa. He's not living in a hostel and then donate. He's not a Anyways,
you either have the elite quarterback or you have the rookie quarterback on his first deal where he's not getting paid that much, and you build this incredible team around him like the Seahawks did when Russell Wilson was younger. And the Seahawks found a new way to try and win, and it's by actually finding a veteran quarterback that's good enough to be the starter and doesn't cost a ton of money. And you pay that guy a little bit, and you build the team around him like he is a rookie quarterback. And I actually think that is something that could work for, like, other teams will definitely copy that method. There will be teams that will take a chance on a veteran who's not going to cost that much if they think they can build this incredible team around him.
Yeah.
And so, being that the Seahawks are really one of the first teams to give that a try, I think it's gone a lot better than anyone could have thought still. They still were a postseason team last year, and they're still in the postseason mix here in December. I understand why fans are frustrated with Geno Smith. He doesn't throw the ball downfield a lot, and when he does, often gets picked off. But he hasn't. I mean, if you gave all of his stats for last season and this season, combined them, and told fans this is what they were going to get with the Geno Smith experiment, you'd have to be happy. Without knowing how it all looked along the way, you'd have to be happy because no one came into last year thinking Geno Smith was going to be a valuable starting quarterback in the NFL. And the frustrating thing about Geno is he'll have 2 bad games and then he'll look amazing against Dallas, in Dallas, against all odds. And you're like, where's this guy been all season?
Right. So it's also like, because we rarely do people do the retrospective because they were mad that the Seahawks didn't take Malik Willis. And you look at the guys that were available to sign and like, would you rather have right now, knowing everything we know right now, would you rather have David Carr, Derek Carr? You probably might have.
I do that all the time with those two, man. I don't know what it is about the Carr brothers, but
yeah, I think they look similar. They both got drafted high, and eventually Derek's got to go play in Houston and really close the circle. But would you rather have him at 4,150, or would you rather have Geno Smith at 375? And I almost
no-brainer. It's a no-brainer.
Right, and I would almost say if you could have them both at 375, you keep the benefit of the moderate contract, I still might rather have Geno Smith. And it's not because I think Derek Carr sucks. I think that's like another thing we do is we either go he sucks or he's amazing. and you can't be in the middle. And that's not really what you need to win a Super Bowl, right? Like even the Russell Wilson, and we've talked, I don't want to relitigate Russell Wilson. By the way, one thing we've missed is the rise, the rise of Russell Wilson. He did, I will say,
Jesus, he rose.
they're 6-6 now. This would have been a leading topic if they would have won. He had a fourth quarter drive that looked very Russell-esque on Sunday, and then it ends without who did they play? Houston, right?
Yeah, he threw a pick in the end zone.
Yeah,
which never done before.
Never done that once before. Anyway, so yeah, the Geno Smith stuff, and also like in the same way, like I'm not kicking Geno Smith out of town, but the nice thing about Geno Smith or quarterbacks like Geno Smith is you can also move on from him pretty quickly. Like the Seahawks could move on from Geno Smith in the offseason if the right option presents itself.
Absolutely. Objectively, I think overall it's been a success with Geno Smith. I understand why people are disappointed with the way things are going now. I also think, especially in the NFL, but football in general, you have so many factors that kind of work against you as you evaluate guys like Geno Smith. You're only playing one game a week. You spend the other 6 days gassing yourself up with whatever emotion was prevailing on that Sunday. If your team won, then you're excited all week. If your team lost, you find ways to make yourself more mad until the next game. In every other sport, you're playing at least a few times a week. So, the reaction time and that ability to kind of just work yourself into a froth about whatever you're feeling, it doesn't exist. These guys go out there the next day and play again. So with the NFL especially, it's like, if you don't like Geno Smith, you're going to spend every day of your life just increasing that dislike for him, regardless of how he plays. And if you like him, then you'll probably be a little bit more objective as you kind of look at his overall performance.
Let me ask you this.
I generally like him. So.
I have I've been grappling with this a little bit recently. How are you at dealing with sports emotionally? Like, so one of my things on my list, UW beat Oregon in like a pretty crazy fashion. This is, by the way, not the most recent game. Washington beat Oregon in the time, I believe, since your daughter was born. Well, it had to be because your daughter was born right before the first Huskies game of the season, right? So she's 13-0. Is this correct? Oh, he fucking unplugged his microphone.
I just had a mic disaster that I fixed, and the whole time you were talking.
Wow.
And it shouldn't affect the podcast because the nice thing about this this platform, it automatically mutes your mic when it senses a problem. So thank you.
Nice.
Yeah.
It was AI came to our
it helped us out. Just like it does with Sports Illustrated. Sorry, what were you asking? How I do emotionally?
Yeah, I'll tell you the reason is I'm going to the Seahawks game against the Philadelphia Eagles, and I'm going with my mom, my sister, and my brother-in-law. Luckily, it's my mom and I sitting together, and my sister and her husband sitting together, because I'm like a very cerebral person at a game. In fact, the last time I went to a game with my mom, we sat in like the 300 level on like the 40-yard line, and I would just be like talking to myself. I'm like, oh, that was a horse collar tackle. And then my mom would be like, what's that? And I would explain it. And then it would get called. And then 35 people behind us would go, that's not a fucking horse collar tackle. You know what I mean? Like these only Seahawks, every call against the Seahawks is bad. Every call for them is good. There's never.
Yeah. No, I'm like you. I'm very cerebral. I often side with the other side in the midst of a game. When we were watching the Washington-Oregon game, there was a terrible pass interference call on Washington, and I was like, I can see how they would call that.
If that call happened if a non-call happened against Washington, I would have been pissed.
Yeah, and it's like I don't understand, especially when it comes to Pac-12 football specifically. I don't understand how fans can just get so beside themselves every game with Pac-12 officiating, because you know what you're going to get. It's going to be garbage.
Yeah.
So you have to expect that they're going to make a lot of garbage calls. But in general, just in sport, I mean, if you grew up a Seattle Mariners fan first and foremost, like I did, if you're acting like a 12 for every sport you watch, you're going to die at 45, because first of all, you have to be somewhat of a nihilist to be a Mariners fan.
Sure.
Or else you won't survive. And beyond that, I mean, just the life of a 12 in general seems hard. It's a hard life, man. Like
Yeah.
if you make it to 60, you've outlived whatever projection I personally would have for you, because just watching
That's
these
12
people,
times 5. That's pretty good if you're a
there's a
numerology
couple,
person.
I mean, there's a lot of like the crazy NFL fan, specifically NFL. You don't see it as much in college, although I'm sure in the South you see it in colleges all the time
Sure.
because they love their college football. But up here, it's more NFL fan. The person that just is angry all the time when things don't go their team's way, that is so jubilant when it does go their way that it just like changes who they are as a person, that drinks themselves into a stupor on game day and screams the entire time at a game. Hard living, man. That is hard living. That's like you don't need to go work out during the week. You don't need to go to a workout class or go to the gym because you are getting that shit in on game
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, so my sister, she's like, yeah, I'm a little worried because you guys might have to see him sad if the Eagles lose, which by the way, it's looking pretty good for him to be honest with you, but he's like, you might have to see him sad if the Eagles lose, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, it's just crazy to me that a mid-30s adult would be like, their attitude for the rest of the day would be, and I love sports. I grew up with sports, but they're like, part of them is that your team loses. Like, I will admit maybe this is when I completely divorced myself from it, but when the Seahawks lost against the Patriots, I was pretty sad for a couple days because that's the Super Bowl, and one of the most devastating ways to lose a game. I was at a bar. This is well litigated in my life. It's been talked about many times. People that you know, by the way, or that you've met, I'm sure. I was there with them watching it in like a private room at my favorite bar, like a place where I have a great reputation and they love me and I get good service. And one of my buddies, when the Seahawks throw the interception, when Russell Wilson throws the interception, he spits on the TV and then slams through the door on his way out. And another friend had a pint glass in his hand and threw it overhand against the wall, and it shatters into 700 pieces. And then there's like other bar regulars that come in and they try to fucking intervene. And I'm like, don't do that because he's not in a mood to be fucking reasoned with. Like, ignore this guy acting like an asshole. And I just can't, after that day for sure, but even before then, I don't think I have had it in me to get that emotional. It's also like, I guess another thing about it is once you have kids or a wife or people that you love, I can't bring the same emotion to a sporting event as I do to something that is like monumental in my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've never been that person. I totally get what you're saying. I have friends that are like the guys that spit on the TV and broke the pint glass. And a lot of times I think that type of fan, you kind of like it, there's a little classism that goes into it. People say, "Oh, these must be uneducated, morons," in a way.
You're going to be upset to find out that one of them is a UW graduate.
No, but that's what I was just about to say, is that the guys I know who are like that are college grads. So it's
right.
There's no these people come from all walks of life. But I've never been that way with sports in general. And I get it. My friends who are like that grew up playing sports. I grew up playing sports. There's so much that we have in common beyond the way we react to a game. And for me, it's just like, I've never really reacted that way to a game. I mean, I remember probably close to 20 years ago now. I remember when it was when Mike Jensen committed the most heinous foul in the NCAA tournament that prevented UW basketball from going to the Elite Eight for the first time in forever, I guess, and instead losing in the Sweet 16 to University of Connecticut. If you're a UW basketball fan, which I know there are not many anymore, but if you are one, you definitely remember that moment. I remember
that was an era where it was even harder to be a UW basketball fan, by the way. There's like 7 televised games a year or something like that.
I mean, it's still the case. But after that game, I remember my girlfriend at the time started crying, and I was like, "What are you doing? Like, it sucks we lost and the season is over, but like, this is no way to behave."
Yeah,
and I'm dead inside because of all of that stuff, man. At times I wish I had that emotion.
Yeah, well, I guess to me the thing is how could you go in with the expectation of, especially like UW basketball, even in the great years of UW basketball, there was never honestly a year where I was like, this team is for sure like even the year they got the 1 seed, it didn't feel like they were going to be able to beat like they didn't feel like a championship favorite by any means. And my memory of that year, and you could correct me if I'm wrong because you have a very good memory for this kind of stuff, but there was some controversy about them even being a 1 seed, I believe. So like the 1 seed title is very exciting, but it doesn't. I don't know that it mattered a ton, and it didn't make me think this team, if they don't win a championship, it's disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, kind of to the specifics of that team, and then just in general, it's hard to just get that worked up about sports in general, but I understand why people do it.
Yeah.
And I understand for a lot of people, this is all you have that brings you joy. I know people who their only joy is derived from sports. They don't have anything very joyous going on in their life. And it sucks to like say that is a thing. Like, part of me feels sad when I see people like that, because I know this is the only thing bringing you joy, and
sure.
it's not always going to deliver that joy. Mm-hmm. And for me, I just know that that's never been the case for me. I don't only derive my joy from sports, even though I love sports, probably more than 95% of people out there. It's not the only thing that provides me joy. And if it was, I would probably find something else to fill the void, because it's not something, as a sports fan, you're not going to win all the time. So
you're going to lose half the time.
Yeah, you're going to be sad just as often as you are happy. So I would hope that this isn't the only thing doing this for you. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, I don't know. It might just be general like emotional stability or maturity, but I feel like I grew out of that very quickly. And I don't know if these people need more good or more bad to happen in their life. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe you need a bunch of family members to die, and then you'll really put this into perspective. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
I've seen it. This is the one thing that I'm very analytical and very cerebral when it comes to just evaluating people in general. I feel like my whole life, the jobs I've had are dealing with people. So I feel like for me, it's important to get a good read on people. Emotional sports fans are something that I just have never been able to pinpoint. Like, what is it that unites all of you? Because I know so many of you who are like me in other ways, but you behave so much differently when it comes to sports. And I know so many of you who could not be farther from me in every other walk of life and are also emotional with sports. So I just cannot figure out what is the unifying factor. Are you all born out of the same trauma that we don't know about? And if we retraced you, would we find that trauma somewhere?
Yeah, it's like Greta Thunberg has like the Earth's temperature the day she was born or some shit like that on her. Apparently that's a big thing. Like people go like, oh, if it was whatever amount of degrees, then you're more likely to be, on the spectrum or something like that. And I genuinely think that is. I'm not making a joke. And I feel like maybe that's your hypothesis with sports fans is like, oh, if it was 71 degrees and raining and the Rams were playing that day, then you're fucked.
Somebody needs to do a study on this, but I don't think anyone wants to round up those people and do the study. And I understand that.
I know they do it too often.
Johns Hopkins ain't taking this
on. I don't think DeAndre Hopkins is taking this on. All right. We also saw the entire, not the entire Jim Harbaugh saga so far as, because he spent. Did Jim Harbaugh coach a single game on the sidelines yet this year? Like, he's coaching in the playoffs, but he's like, this dude. He started the year suspended, maybe spent a couple weeks on the sideline, then got suspended for the rest of the regular season. I think there's still potentially pending punishment from the NCAA if they don't find his punishment from the Big Ten sufficient, or from Michigan sufficient. And I don't even like this whole sign stealing scandal. To me, feels a little bit like the kind of like probably something everybody's doing a little more than because it's like it's so easy to do, I guess, is the other thing.
It's look, when you get real elaborate with sign stealing the way the Houston Astros did, you've crossed a line. You know, if you have a whole system involved to steal signs, that's silly. But if you can just simply make out someone's signs because that's what you do, people do that all the time.
Well, but it's not just that, right? There was a guy on the coaching staff that was traveling. This is two dudes who have very young children who probably didn't follow this story as closely as they should have, commenting confidently on it. I recognize that right now. But it was like a dude was traveling to the games and like figuring out, like decoding their signs.
Yeah,
So,
apparently on his own accord, with no oversight from
of
Jim
course,
Harbaugh or
Jim
anybody
Harbaugh
else at the
didn't.
University of
Yeah,
Michigan. Yeah,
no one would have asked for something like
normal
that.
guys do that. Yeah, no, it's a weird situation for sure, and it's with college sports, man. There is like a new reason to get suspended every single day, and at this point, we're all so immune to like the shock from it that it's just like, I don't know. I'm a Washington fan, and we're staring down the barrel of potentially playing that Michigan team in the championship, the national championship, if we make it there and they make it there. So for me, it's like, I really don't care, man. Just if they happen to beat us and they stole all our signs, that would suck. But am I gonna like lose my shit over it? No, I don't know. It's sports, man. This is what happens.
See, this is why we should have been, because I'm sure we would have actually looked at this story a little more closely, and now I feel like we're like Jim Harbaugh supporters on accident. That sucks.
I just have this belief that Jim Harbaugh struggles with Seattle teams, dating back to his days at the Niners. I'm sure even when he was at the University of San Diego, he probably had some problems with Seattle somewhere along the line.
I guess there's not, like, I was hoping it would be a lower division, so it'd be like he lost to Western Washington University when they had a football program or something like that. Maybe he lost to D1, D2 matchup to Eastern at some point. Which they definitely would not claim to be Seattle. Okay, before we get into the rest of the sports topics, because now we're like up to date, we've done it. If you were listening to podcasts that were doing current events, you fucked up, because you could have just spent 45 minutes with us at the beginning of December, and we would have caught you up on everything that happened. You could have been living in a Y2K bunker. Now you're completely caught up with all the sports. Don't worry about it.
That's what you get with the season 2 premiere.
That's right. But how is parenting going? Because I'm having problems, so I want to hear how it's going for you. I hope there's problems in your life.
It's going very well. Honestly, the thing that I'm getting past now that I really don't like is talking about parenting. Because here's the thing.
Too bad.
No, I don't mind talking about
this podcast.
But here's the thing. Socially awkward people in general, if you talk to socially awkward people, right, they're not good conversationalists. So if they find a topic that they can talk about, they latch onto that one topic and they just beat it to death. Because if you switch off that topic, they don't know what to talk about anymore. So when people find out I have a baby and I'm a parent now, they just want to hammer that shit to death. And I can't talk about parenting anymore. I don't know. Most days we sleep pretty good for having a baby, and then we wake up and we just make sure the baby makes it through the day. And I get some joy out of it at times, and other times I'm like, oh man, I wish this wasn't happening right now. And that's mostly how I spend my day. So
the other day I said loudly enough for my wife to hear, I said, why did we have a second child? I said it to my daughter's face, by the way, my newest daughter's face. I will never say anything bad about the new daughter in front of the old daughter, because I don't want her to pick. She doesn't quite understand the nuance of the joke at this point.
No, but kids don't understand the nuance of any joke until they're adults, as it turns out. Have you ever heard like a teenager try to tell a joke? It's the worst thing in the world, man.
It's bad. It's bad. I mean, by the way, one of the saddest things in the world is when you see someone make their teenage kid do stand-up. We can't stand for that. That's child abuse.
The only teenage stand-ups that have ever been successful, like really successful, are like Dave Chappelle and Pete Davidson. That's it.
Yes, and like, imagine the trauma that Pete Davidson had to go through to get there.
Oh yeah, not one.
Yeah. Our 5-month-old is teething right now, and I forgot. There's just so many things you forget, because we were in a stretch of time. She was like way more difficult than our first one at the beginning, and then she hit a stretch that was just easy peasy, and then she started teething.
Easy peasy. We're at 3 months, so she hasn't started teething yet, and that's great.
Yeah, she went from, we were like essentially sleeping through the night. Like, she would sleep for, like, I would say 7 to 10 straight hours, and we would, if my wife, now that she's back to work, she goes to sleep right about the same time as the kid does. But before, we would like stay up and watch a show. Now it's like, right now, last night, the night before, uh, we got like I have a combined 5 hours of sleep under my belt right now from those 2 nights because she just is losing her mind, and there's like you can't do anything. There's like you can give a kid that age Tylenol, like very little Tylenol, and that'll help the pain. She doesn't want to chew on everyone's like, chew on this icy thing. She doesn't want to do it. I can't fucking make her. I can't reason with this child. You know what I mean? I can't explain that you need this. It'll make you feel better. And so you're just left with this kid. And then she's got a little bit of a cold too. So she's like coughing and sneezing, and that'll kick her awake. And then when she wakes up, she feels the pain and she starts crying from the pain. And then you go through this cycle of you feed her, you give her fucking Tylenol, you blow her nose. We got this, by the way, disgusting parent tool that works amazing, where you literally suck boogers and snot out of the kids.
Too. We've actually used it a lot.
We got it yesterday because we were trying to solve this problem. Previously we had
you should have talked to me. I could have given you a whole rundown of equipment you can get to clean out a kid's nose.
We had the ball syringe thing, which is good. That's good. This other thing works better, but yesterday I went to a movie. This was planned in advance, so not as a reaction to this kid being shitty, but I went to a movie with my oldest and ate way too much candy. And then I got home and my wife was like, check this thing out. You want to try it? And I'm like, my stomach is full of candy and popcorn. It's not doing great holding all this in as it is. And then I understand there's something that's going to block the snot from reaching my mouth. You could tell me that, and I could know it intellectually. Something about sucking on the end of a tube and snot's coming in on the other side, I could not handle it. And I don't have a sensitive stomach, typically. One of the most disgusting things I've ever seen marketed to parents.
Yeah, it's called a nose, Prita. And if you don't have kids or don't care about
ours is called Suck It Nose. That's what it's got.
If you're not into parenting at all, then this is a terrible subject. But one of the weirdest things you'll ever see is this nose sucker, where you literally put your mouth on one end of the sucker and you suck air and snot comes out of their nose. And somehow through some miracle of innovation, the snot does not enter you at any point, which is good. You don't want that.
Yeah.
But it's a wild.
Yeah, it's like you're siphoning snot out of your child's body, basically.
Yeah, whoever using your own mouth. Whoever had the idea for this product is insane. And I can only imagine how many times they had to try it where they actually sucked in snot.
Yeah.
To make this thing work.
I said that today to somebody. I said the person who invented this is a genius that has to be in prison. There's no way this person's not in prison. They deserve it.
There's so many weird products like that when you have a baby. And we actually had a recent thing with our dog over the weekend where she had this crazy allergic reaction. We actually came back home from watching the UW Oregon Pac-12 championship, and our dog's face. It's like those pictures of dogs you see after they've been stung by an entire hive of bees. It's like the entire thing is swelled up to 3 times its size, and you just don't know what's wrong. I mean, at least with the bees, you know what happened, and it's kind of funny. But we found our dog this way, having had an allergic reaction, terrifying, because we have no idea what happened. We've been gone. She had this allergic reaction, and I was basically up with her all night that night as we kind of worked to treat it. Took her to the emergency vet at 2:30 in the morning, did all these things that really, really suck. And I got to thinking in that moment, this is not specific to the dog, but I was like, this is one of those moments where, and I talked about this before I even had a kid, where having a dog or something else that you're just responsible for keeping alive actually prepares you for parenting. Because there are going to be many nights in my future, and I've had already, where my wife or myself are going to have to be up with our baby because they can't sleep and they're screaming their head off or something terrible is going on. And so for all those people out there that are like, you can never compare a pet to a baby. Yes, you can. You absolutely can, because there are situations you're going to encounter with your pet that will prepare you for being a better parent. And I think you can compare a dog.
You can compare a dog.
Yeah.
Cats don't count. Yeah. Cats are like house plants that piss and shit in a box.
That's true. I mean, I was at PetSmart the other day buying some expensive food for this dog that now has allergies. And the woman in front of me was telling the cashier about her 8 fucking cats at home. And I was just like, oh my God. Of course, if you have 8 cats, I assume all you ever want to talk about are your 8 cats. That's your whole life, man.
I have a rule. that there cannot be. This is, by the way, if you're a listener of this podcast and this applies to you, it's definitely not about you. It's for sure about other people. We can't afford to lose listeners. No, you can't have more pets than people.
Yeah, that's true. There needs to at least be a 1-to-1 ratio.
Yeah, and that includes, by the way, if you're one person, you can't have a cat and a dog. I'm sorry, that's the deal. You have to get a roommate if you're gonna have a cat and a dog. That's the rule. I listen. If you're crazy, you have a mental illness.
There's a number where it's like still endearing. Like we have 2 dogs, and it's still endearing at 2. But if we had a 3rd dog, people would be like, "You guys are a little nuts."
Yeah.
Like, there's a tipping point. 2 is always a fair number. People are like, "You got 2 of whatever. You can have 2 of anything. You could have 2 iguanas." People would be like, 2 iguanas. That's great. If you had a 3rd iguana, people would be like, "You should be committed."
Yeah.
Because you are a crazy person. And
I don't know if 2 iguanas. I don't know. I think I disagree. I think iguanas.
You can always justify it by being like, well, we had the first iguana, and then he seemed bored.
Yeah, I guess you're right. My problem is with the first iguana. You're right. If you have iguanas as a pet, you got a problem. I'm sorry if that's you. I'm sorry if you've been secretly running an iguana farm that you've pared down to 2, but
you got to limit it, man. You got to limit it to 2. Can you imagine?
Also, if you have more, if you keep having more kids so that you can keep getting more pets, that's also bad.
Do you think Phillip Rivers has like 16 pets and that's why he's got 17 people in his family?
He's like, I want a new dog, and his wife's like, you know the rules, motherfucker.
Like, all right, let's get to work.
Oh man. Well, I'm glad it's going well. I'm happy to hear it. I also am trying. I try not to pepper you with. I guess it's not even that I try. I just don't care enough. Because I got my own shit going on. That's the same reason you also aren't asking me about it.
No parent of any newborn ever needs to make an excuse, especially to another parent of a newborn. Like, if I don't talk to you for months on end, I understand. And frankly, I probably wouldn't even want to go out of my way to do it. And it's
as you can tell by the release schedule of this podcast, by the way.
It's when people that don't have kids, or certainly don't have like newborns, are like expecting you to be more present or as present as you were before, where you're like, are you insane, man? Like, I don't give a shit about you anymore. I know we used to be friends, but you might as well be dead to me now.
Yeah, you're on the level of a coworker now. Every friend goes down a couple levels, you know.
Absolutely. But here's the thing. I'm the type of person, and this is going to sound crazy because a lot of times I'm just sitting at home on my phone not listening to my wife, which is a problem, I understand. But when I do make it a point to like go out with friends, or when we go out with people and we're going out and doing something, I'm like, I want to be 100% here. I don't want to be thinking about my whatever's going on at home or whatever's going on with other people or at work or whatever it might be. Like, I definitely want to be present with those people. And so when I do make the time, it means something. Like this podcast too. I mean, it's like, if we're doing this, I want to be here. And so like, baby can cry and whatever.
Neglect the kid. I've been telling you that since she was born.
My wife isn't even home right now.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
The dogs are running the house.
It is nice because one of our dogs is actually the allergic dog, the problem dog. Very good with the baby. They're both very good with the baby, but this one dog each of our dogs has like a chosen person. We have one dog that chose my wife, and we have one dog that chose me, and wherever each of us goes, that one dog follows. But the only time my dog won't follow me is when we set the baby down somewhere on the playmat, on the couch, wherever we set her. If we set her somewhere and we walk away from the baby, that dog is going to stay right by her, and she's going to take care of her. And that's great. That is another, if you had a cat, this cat would be trying to claw at this baby, but the dog is like, no, I'm going to sit right here and take care of this baby. And honestly, for as bad a parent as that might make me sound, that does give me some peace of mind to actually leave the room where my baby is and leave the dog there, because I know the dog will watch over the baby, just like
I'm sure the dog would bark if something bad was going on.
Yes, just like the dog in Peter Pan, Nana. Same.
I've probably told this to you, if not, well, buckle up. But the day we brought our first kid home, so my wife went into labor. It was 20 hours of labor, and then we didn't know that we were going to have to prove that our kid had peed. before we left. We assumed we didn't know like what the checklist was, and so she peed like really early in, but we didn't have like a diaper that showed it, right? And so we ended up staying at the hospital an extra like 16 hours, and just trying this whole time to get her to pee, filling her with liquids, gave her a couple beers, like you know.
Try this Modelo; it works for me.
Yeah, but so we by the time we leave the hospital, we are exhausted, and we thought we were going to leave at like 8 in the morning, and it's midnight, and we're going home, and my mom has been watching our animals for this stretch. I'm driving, and I'm like 5 under the speed limit, so careful. We get to our house. There's even like where I live. There's like occasionally there's some riffraff outside, and there was riffraff that night, and I'm like, I do not have any fucking energy for this. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to try to get this kid into the house.
Ran over the riffraff on the street.
Yeah, ran over the riffraff. And we get into the house, and my daughter's crying because she's a baby. And our cat, my wife thinks that he thought my daughter was another cat coming into the house. I don't give him that much credit.
That's about the right size.
He started acting very aggressive and violent and hissing and like acting the way he does when he's going to attack something or when he's agitated. And then I'm at like, maybe 4 hours of sleep over the course of 3 days. Just got this kid home after like a kind of stressful attempt to not have to pay for an extra day in the hospital. Make sure our daughter's healthy, all that stuff. I'm exhausted. I just drove. I'm white knuckling it on the road. Now this time I'm drunk driving the new kid home. It doesn't matter. I'm fucking over the speed limit, drifting around corners. But the first time you're very cautious. And so it's just like a very stressful moment. And this cat starts freaking out. I was ready to end that cat's life that day. I'm sorry, PETA. I'm sorry. This cat was presenting like a real danger to our kid. And I fucking, dude, I was like, he ended up spending, it was air conditioned, but it was August, and we had a guest room that had nothing in it, and he ended up spending a month in there, and this is the most genius thing I ever did. I bought a baby doll, and I recorded my daughter crying with my phone, and played her crying over a Bluetooth speaker with the baby doll in the car seat, like the same, from his perspective, the same scenario. And at first I walk in and he's freaking out, and eventually I just did it every single day, and he came around, and now he's like, he just stays away from the kids, which is all we really want.
Yeah, that's why cats are assholes.
They suck. They suck. They're so much worse than dogs, which is well-tread territory, but it's true.
This is a real reason why if you are like a cat, I'm not going to genderify this and say a cat lady, but if you're a cat person, we all know that there are cat ladies out there, but there's also cat dudes. There are cat dudes. Usually they like bring their cat out to bars with them or breweries. It's very strange.
We have seen that together, I believe. Is that right? Is that
they usually have like a ponytail and a goatee, and you're like, why?
They usually go to Dickerson's Brewhouse on comedy night, and I believe
cat people. It's like if you're out there, if you're a single cat person, the odds are stacked against you, mostly because I don't think a lot of people would want to procreate with you because your cat might kill the kid.
True. That's the only reason. All right. So we should talk about the Mariners for a little bit, because the other thing that we missed is the Jerry DiPoto, by the way. So he says, and tell me what part of this I get wrong. Basically, our intention is to win 54% of the time. You should feel lucky that we are winning 54% of the time. And then he's been on this kind of campaign to cut down strikeouts. He trades away Eugenio Suarez, or Gino, as everyone likes to call him. I was having a conversation about Spanish pronunciations at work
unless
today.
You're Rick Riz, and then you're like, hey, Eugenio Suarez. It's like, yeah, I get the A is there, but most people kind of skip right over that.
Yeah. I love Dave Sims pronouncing Spanish names, so it's always exciting for me. People get so mad at him pronouncing them correctly.
If the Mariners produced the tape of Dave Sims saying every Latin baseball player's name, I'd probably buy that.
I would too, and then I would teach my daughter Spanish using that tape. So And then so they end up they get rid of Suarez, and then there's this trade yesterday as we're talking. 2 days ago as we're talking, maybe even longer than that ago. I don't know. Days are running together. Of Jared, it's basically it's really reminiscent, by the way, of the deal that brought Jared Kelenic here, which I think the irony of that is fun to me. Which is, if you remember, it was the deal that sent Edwin Diaz and Robinson Cano to the Mets. And actually, at the time, it was so the Mariners paid, I think, $60 million of Robinson Cano's salary, but they basically gave up Edwin Diaz to take $60 million off their payroll. And then they got some prospects back. One of them was that wasn't the Marco deal, was it? What was the?
No, there was a bunch of other randos in that trade.
Gotcha. But then really, Kelenic was but there was also at the time there was apparently an offer that included Jeff McNeil. This is my memory of it. Included Jeff McNeil,
who would have been the next best player in that deal.
Would have been the best player realistically.
Yeah. Kelenic was the prize at the time. It is what it basically boiled down to is Robinson Cano's contract, Edwin Diaz for Jared Kelenic and a bunch of nobodies.
Yeah, and it was only, by the way, it was only half of Cano's contract, but it was like a pretty obvious salary dump. And then you're like, oh shit, there's a bonus that there's actually a good prospect coming back. When the Mariners made that trade, genuinely, I'm like not a Dipoto supporter. I've been out on him since basically I thought he could save his job by signing Shohei Ohtani in 2017. He did not sign Shohei Ohtani in 2017, and I can't believe he still has a job. He's a fake analytics guy, by the way, and I'm an analytics guy. I thought it was the most brilliant trade he'd made maybe in his entire tenure. And then Kelenic, I will tell you this, on its own, I'm not upset by the. I know you are not happy with this trade. I'm fine with it because first off, I just don't think Jared Kelenic. If Jared Kelenic stays in Seattle, the same way you can be mad about like the trade that sent Chris Taylor to the Dodgers, I don't think Chris Taylor is becoming Chris Taylor in Seattle, the Chris Taylor we know today. So to me, you liberate Jared Kelenic from this pretty like lackluster historically development program in Seattle. I also don't know that I think Kelenic is going to become he is living off of the start of 2023 in a lot of people's minds. His post, June on.
He had like 10 home runs in like the first 2 months, and then I think he finished the season with like 11 home runs.
11 home runs, and he like raised his average and dropped his strikeouts, and you wonder how much of like this. I really hate the thing that they're doing where they're going, we want to cut down on strikeouts. Well, fine, cut down on strikeouts, but don't do it at the expense of. I hate the thing where it's like we're stupid. So I know they're not stupid, but like
I think. Let's take a step back.
All right.
First of all, if you're not a Mariner fan, I will say that the Mariners are one of those very intriguing teams. The way that the Moneyball Oakland A's were intriguing, in that you could actually, whether you care about the Mariners or not, just like whether you cared about those A's or not, you can find a narrative here that is compelling to be a part of. And I think the Mariners are becoming that compelling narrative, but in the worst possible way. The same way that the Moneyball A's were a compelling narrative in a very positive way because they were living on the margins and finding a way in this big budget sport to succeed with a very low budget. That was an interesting narrative. That's why Brad Pitt started a movie about that team. For as bad as the movie was.
Thank you. I think we've talked about this before, but the fact that thing won Best Picture or whatever was a fucking travesty.
Yeah, they butchered the actual story for the convenience of a movie.
Yeah.
But just like that was an interesting story, this should be an interesting story, except the Mariners just consistently find ways to fail when they try to execute this plan of living within the margins, zigging, like the way that we talked about the Seahawks earlier, zigging when everyone else is zagging, trying to find a competitive advantage that others have not found.
Sure.
The Mariners, I think when the trade you were just referencing, when they acquired Jared Kelnick, that was an innovative way to save money. They basically needed to dump a bad contract. A lot of times when you dump a bad contract, you just package it with some prospects and you get a team to take all of that, that whole package, willing to pay this person off, this malcontent veteran or whatever, for the benefit of the prospects that you're sending them that cost them basically nothing as they develop in their minor league system. That's basically what the Mariners just did in this recent trade, getting rid of Kelnick. They got very little in return, but what they did get, they were able to entice the Atlanta Braves to part with because they gave them Jared Kelnick. They gave them Jared Kelnick, and they gave them two bad contracts in Evan White and Marco Gonzalez, which really aren't even, in the grand scheme of things, neither one of them actually had quote-unquote bad contracts the way Robinson.
Evan White's contract was bad. I will disagree with you on that. The moment that contract got signed,
it was bad, but for a real contending team, the amount of money that they were trying to save by parting with Jared Kelnick to get these prospects or whatever is minimal. A real team doesn't give a shit about Marco Gonzalez's contract or Evan White's contract. You just cut those guys.
$15 million.
I mean, it's $15 million, but a lot of teams can deal with that. The best franchises can deal with that.
I'm gonna let you finish. I'm trying not to be Kanye West right now.
I'm gonna let you finish.
It's $15 million, but it's also like, I think there's an argument that they gave up a non-valuable asset. In addition, like
yes, I've heard a lot of people. In fact, everybody who has filled my Twitter mentions with hate for which there are not. I mean, generally, anytime I have an opinion on the Mariners, it's like at least 60-40 split, right? Like 60% of people might side with me, but the other 40% don't. This is the first time it's like more like 95-5 where people are on my side with this. And so I get that there is a compelling argument to be made for the devil's advocate side of saying, well, it might not be that bad of a trade. You're right. It might not be. It might prove to be okay in the long run. Maybe these two people we got back.
No, those guys suck. Those guys are nothing. Those are organizational fodder.
Nothing. I mean,
they're absolutely nothing.
There's really no defending that this wasn't a salary dump.
It for sure was a salary dump.
But I agree. All the people who make the point that, well, maybe Jared Kelnick is nothing in the long run and this doesn't matter. Or you're adding by subtraction, right? Jared Kelnick was only going to hurt your team in some way, shape, or form. And by getting rid of him, you are helping the overall health of the team. I can understand that argument. That's not the point. That's not the point that's making people mad. I get the argument, but it's such a small piece of the precedent that's being set here that it almost needs to be forgotten because it starts shifting the narrative and shifting the blame away from the organization. The problem with that trade and any trade like it is that the Mariners are now operating like a team like the Oakland A's, but without any success. The Oakland A's can at least say, hey, we were able to sustain success for a few years by living within these margins and finding this competitive advantage that nobody else found. The Mariners aren't doing anything new. The competitive advantages have already been found by teams like Tampa and like Oakland back in the day. Even Kansas City, when they won their World Series title, they were kind of in that same small market, but making it work mentality. The Mariners are basically just following suit with these other teams, trying to spin things innovatively with these salary dump trades, but ultimately not getting anywhere with them. That Mets trade now is a complete waste. Edwin Diaz is still a very good closer for the Mets, but the Mariners have nothing to show for that deal other than they cleared off the salary because now they just repeated the cycle with Kelnick.
But I mean, obviously, like the salary, the budget isn't like a they don't have like a $20 million budget for a first baseman. They have a budget, and so it's possible you can't sign Julio to that big of an extension, for example, if you don't clear off the Cano money. Or you could, I mean, and it's not like they haven't been, it's not like they have not spent anything. Maybe you can't sign Robbie Ray, which has not turned into a great deal, but it's like that's part of the risk of signing players is some of them aren't going to work out. Maybe they couldn't have extended Luis Castillo. Like these are to say that it like there's nothing left to show for it. That $60 million has been reallocated into other players who are valuable.
Here's the other problem. This is where the Mariners just consistently shoot themselves in the foot. they boast about their profits all the time. And what you don't see is the reallocation of those profits into the on-field product. I understand what you're saying. You're saying by dumping Robinson Cano's salary years ago, that allowed them to potentially go sign Julio Rodriguez to an early extension, to potentially acquire Luis Castillo via trade and pay for his contract, to get Robbie Ray or any of the other veterans that they've actually paid money to. To accuse the Mariners of being a franchise that doesn't spend is foolish. They do spend sometimes. It's just they also then go out of their way to say, but look at all this extra money we have that we don't seem to be using on the on-field product. And your number one priority with a baseball organization should be the on-field product, even though there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that requires money to operate. You still have to be focused on the on-field product first and foremost. And the Mariners, by all accounts, are not one of those teams that's doing that. And that's what's infuriating for people in general and fans especially. It's just like you can't operate a team this way and build any good faith with the people that would otherwise support your franchise. And that's where the Mariners consistently kill themselves. And where's that money going? I mean, I think it's fair to ask, like, where is this money going that the Mariners boast about as being profits that's not being reallocated into the team? Like, if anything, their payroll should be going up every year, and it keeps going down. They keep saying they'll raise it, but they don't raise it. So where's that money going? These are all fair questions to ask of a team that considers itself a contender, yet has only been to the playoffs once in 22 years now. So it's just a very strange. You just don't. You wish you had more insight into what they're actually doing if they're not winning. You know, I think that's all fans want is transparency. If your team is winning, you don't even have to open the books. You're winning. Everyone's happy. But if you're not winning, you have to be transparent about what you're doing to get to the point of winning. And the Mariners are very much not that. They do not provide the transparency to help people understand what their direction is. And that's why fans get so upset. It's like anything in life. If things are going poorly, the best way to kind of clear up any misconceptions is communication. And the Mariners suck at communicating where their direction is going every time they get a chance. Every time that chance presents itself. Jerry Dipoto speaks, he says the wrong shit every time. An owner speaks, he says crazy shit every time. I mean, it's problematic.
So I'm looking at connecting two dots on the internet, not to like point by point fact check you, but I was a little curious when you said the thing about the Mariners boasting about their profits, because I just think so the last 2 years, 71 million, 86 million, obviously these are like big numbers. And especially, by the way, this is as Major League Baseball operating income has gone down. They've increased. But so the previous year, they were negative 35 million, pretty common, I think, across Major League Baseball teams because of no fans in the stands for most of the season. The other seasons, though, it's like 31 million the previous year, 31 million. They're negative the year before that. And you're like, even let's say they spent all of that 31 million. The thing that I read said the average MLB team in those previous years had an operating income of around 20 million. So, but let's say they spent the whole 31 million, not just the marginal difference. You're talking about like a $31 million player is probably not the difference on most of those teams being good playoff contenders or not, especially that like an $11 million player isn't. I do think there's a pretty good argument to be made in these years that we're talking about, but also, of course, the payroll is going to increase as the players they have commitments to increase. There's a bunch of uncertainty around Major League Baseball's TV situation, by the way. So I understand like a slightly conservative approach. I understand that frustration also. What I would actually say is, and not to be an apologist, because I think Dipoto's got to go. I can't be mad at Dipoto on that, by the way. Dipoto's not the one. He's not the CFO. That's another misconception, is Dipoto's not the guy deciding necessarily if they spend that $86 million on I'm sure he would love to have $80 more million in his budget, $86 more million in his budget. That would be great for him. But that's not, well, I'm talking about purely Dipoto at this point. Ownership is tough because you can't fire ownership. It's always been difficult, right? It's always been difficult to deal with frugal owners, and it's also like the Mariners were like, like 30 years into almost not having a lot of goodwill built up with, even when Nintendo owned the team, there wasn't like a lot of transparency even at all back then. Like,
but in some ways, when Nintendo owned the team, at the very least, you had Nintendo's money, and they were actually spending pretty frivolously when Nintendo owned the team. They just weren't spending wisely, and they bought a lot of expensive players that never panned out. Now they don't even have the financial backing of Nintendo to help save them, which is in some ways almost makes more of a case for Jerry Dipoto being okay at his job because of the strict parameters under which he operates. But I agree with you. I think fans often debate who's at fault for the Mariners' lack of success, if it's ownership.
Did I freeze or did you freeze? Somebody froze.
It's all of the above. Yeah, it's the ownership is not great.
Oh, that's so funny. By the way, you froze completely, and I said, "Did I freeze or did you freeze?" And from my vantage point, you said it's all of the above. That's where we cut back in.
All right. Well, I meant it's all of the above being a problem for the Mariners.
Gotcha.
Same for the problems we experienced here. But yeah, I think just the ownership is bad, but you can't fire ownership. So you have to find someone like a Billy Beane once did with the Oakland A's that can operate under these very harsh conditions in some ways and still find ways to succeed, which Jerry Dipoto has not proven he can do.
Sure.
He can't operate under these parameters and actually build a winning team. He did it.
But I also think if you looked at the Mariners record compared to the A's record, and let's take the last couple of years where they've been trying to become the Oklahoma City Thunder and tanking for the sake of moving out of Oakland. If you take those years out, I suspect that Dipoto has a better record than Oakland over that stretch. But here's what I'll say. I agree with you. Dipoto's not the guy. An interesting thing about this to me is you're not supposed to say that stuff. But we all know that there's like the Mariners are not unique being a team that is not solely focused on winning a championship. In fact, I would suspect it's like Mark Cuban maybe is the or like obviously Steinbrenner was into it. Most owners we make fun of him like crazy. You would love to have Jerry Jones own the Mariners and be fucking running through a wall to try to win a championship before he dies.
In some ways it is unfortunate that a guy like Paul Allen owned two professional teams in sports that have salary caps and didn't own the Mariners, a team that basically exists in a sport with no salary cap, where as one of the richest guys in the entire world, he could have afforded to go pay for these players, some of the biggest players out there, if he really wanted to. Do you
think, though, this is like kind of the thing to me, do you think he would have, let's say Paul Allen or not, I mean, obviously, like, Paul Allen, rest in peace, Paul Allen, we love you, I guess. I don't know if he was a good guy or not, to be honest with you, but thanks for all the, time and money you put into the Mariners, or in the Seahawks. Yeah. Well, I'm going to go find the worst thing about him and assume you love that also. Imagine a team that's owned by a Paul Allen type, and now tell me, what do you think the Mariners' payroll would be? Do you think Paul Allen, and obviously these last couple of years, they've had a pretty large operating income, but you think Paul Allen has this at a $250 million payroll, or?
I don't know. I mean, we will never know. That's the unfortunate thing. And by all accounts, people who defend an owner like John Stanton talk about how big of a baseball fan he is. This guy goes and sits not in a suite, but down, still Diamond Club, but it's at least
he's not slumming it with.
Yeah, you're not slumming it in the Diamond Club, but at least you're on the field level where people can see you, which I respect from an owner. And he sits there and keeps score like a weirdo, which I've done that before, but it's weird to do it every
You are a weirdo.
I am
That's cerebral sports shit.
We
need him to be, you know what we need is John Stanton to be more like, we need him throwing pint glasses at walls, goddammit. That's what we really want.
Maybe, I don't know. People say he's a huge fan, but he doesn't know how to build a winner. I mean, there's a difference between being a fan and being good enough at your job to build a winner. And I think that's where there's disconnect here. I mean, I agree with you, man. It is this is probably not the regime to get it done. And there are people out there that say, "What you can't fire Dipoto or you can't change the regime now because if you do that, do you want them to have to rebuild with someone who could potentially be worse?" But it's like when you're in a shitty relationship with somebody, it's like, no, you probably don't want to have to go back out, start dating again, go to the gym and make yourself look presentable and stop eating the foods you like so you're not a fat bastard. You don't want to do all of that stupid shit just to find the next person who may or may not be better than the person you're with. They might actually be worse. You don't know. But what you want is the hope and the ability to feel something so that you're not stuck in this dying relationship. And that's where it feels like the Mariners are at with Jerry Dipoto.
Man, what did Jerry Dipoto do to you?
It's this dying relationship where 8 years into it, this is what it is. This is just who he is. We know who he is by now. So it's like, if you're happy with that, if you're happy with mediocrity, then I understand why you would not want to fire a guy like Jerry Dipoto.
I also think I hate that idea. I know I'm agreeing with you, by the way, if it doesn't sound like that. I hate that idea because how much do you think, like, Ty France, or who's an example of someone that, how much do you think Luis Castillo is like, oh, well, Jerry Dipoto left, my whole view of this organization is different. Like, if you change the manager when you're on the verge, I understand how you're like, that is a big volatile risk. And we might put this team into a situation where they have to rebuild. But it's not like a bunch of players leave with Dipoto. It's almost like they view it like the way if you let, like, let's say you fire Jim Harbaugh, for example, and now you have a whole recruiting class that's in flux because it's not like players on the free agent market are like, well, they have a rookie GM, so I don't think I'm going to sign there.
No, it's the money's always going to matter the most. It's like any of us. It's like your job. If the CEO leaves the company you're at, you're like, well, that kind of sucks. And that might mean that a few months from now, I might be out of a job because we might shake everything up here, but I'm still getting paid by this place. So I'm going to stick around, and while also keeping my eyes open on other opportunities. And we live in the most free market system where you can go change your job whenever you want, basically.
Right.
Where baseball players are beholden to, any of the teams that are out there that are available to them at any point in time, and their contract status, and whether a team even wants to part with them. So,
well, they're also guaranteed their contracts. So, like, that thing, like, I might be out of a job is like, yeah, maybe you're sitting on the couch, but you're making millions of dollars.
You're still making the money. Yeah. So I agree that that's not something that players necessarily worry about. So unlike with college sports where it really does dictate the people that might come play for you, in professional sports, firing those front office people, it might change the direction of your organization as time goes by, but does it really affect the players that are there? No, not really.
All right, we have one more big topic, before we get into the... do we want to do the home run game today? Are you prepared? I'm not, so if you say no, that's fine.
We don't have to. I found one, but I can save it for next time.
Oh, no, we're doing it then.
No, I think we should this is too big of a topic. I
don't want you to see your child for another several hours, so...
yeah, we can skip the home run game.
Okay.
This topic is too big. So, and we've been prefacing it, and the one or two people that have actually stuck to this point to hear about us talk about it deserve to hear.
Wouldn't those analytics just be fucking disconcerting? So for the second time in the college football playoff era, the Washington Huskies are in the college football playoff, and that is not, believe it or not, that is not the biggest story surrounding this college football playoff. So the big controversy is going into, by the way, the final year where it's going to be a 4-team playoff. Going into the conference championship week, Florida State is ranked number 4. Alabama was ranked number 8. Georgia's ranked number 1. Washington, I think, was 3. They had actually jumped over Florida State despite both teams winning in the college football playoff rankings, which I thought was, I didn't necessarily think it was undeserved, but I thought, I will tell you this, I started to have a lot of anxiety about Washington getting leapfrogged by a one-loss team. The way they were winning games down the stretch, it's been, how many games in a row have been, is it all like the last 6 games or something have been one score One score games.
They've been close. Yeah, a lot of close games. They haven't really had the Huskies, especially, have not had any like surefire wins for quite some time.
Right. And they're playing ranked teams, like, mostly. I get that. And you beat Oregon twice in that stretch. You beat Oregon twice with arguably, potentially, I think we're going to find out probably that in the first Oregon game, Michael Penix got hurt. I think that seems like somewhat obvious.
It's pretty obvious that Michael Penix has a rib issue that is not being disclosed. We found out yesterday, as we're talking about this, that Rome Odunze, who you could argue should have been a Heisman candidate, and people argue will be a top 5 or 10 draft pick in the NFL draft next year, has played over half the season with a broken rib and a punctured lung at one point, and has been the most amazing receiver in college football. And Michael Penix, at the same time, has also had some sort of rib issue that has not entirely been disclosed.
Yeah. So Rome Odunze, by the way, I watched that dude, and I know that there's like, I've been wrong before. I thought Reggie Williams was like gonna be a Hall of Famer, and then it was a pretty big bust in the NFL.
Well, he might have been a Hall of Famer, but he discovered cocaine in the NFL, and that
doesn't help. There's some Hall of Famers that like cocaine. Let's not say that you can't do cocaine and be a Hall of Famer, because some of the most famous Hall of Famers were big cocaine guys. I was watching Rome Odunze the last couple of weeks. I thought, like, this dude's going to be a Hall of Famer in the NFL. He does so many things that I think are valuable in the NFL. Great. He's like great at so many things. He's probably not going to be the like fastest guy, the absolute fastest burner, but he's like, his body control is amazing. His route running is very good for a guy his size, and his like ability, and I mean, Penix and Odunze, that Oregon State game, they basically like Polk and oh my God, why can't I think of his name? McMillan. Polk and McMillan basically like disappeared for 3 straight games. I think they were like, one of them or both of them were like literally absent or statistically absent completely for stretches, and those dudes just combine to absolutely dominate. And the rapport they have is like young Rice-esque, like, and you watch like the catches that Odunze is making. He's making incredibly difficult catches several times a game.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend about this today, and they asked, why is Rome Odunze not one of the Heisman finalists, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is? And it's strictly name recognition and East Coast media, having seen Marvin Harrison play every game, and the fact that his dad is an NFL Hall of Famer. That's
and a murderer.
Yeah.
He might not want to get on his bad side.
Allegedly a murderer. He gets to be there because of all of those things, where Rome Odunze is the better receiver. But I totally agree with everything.
So that had the better season. Had the better season, by the way. Like, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is also pretty amazing.
He's good for sure, but that we veered off from the big controversy of Florida State.
So you go into this weekend. Georgia beats Alabama, not entirely unexpected, and Michigan takes care of business. Washington squeaks past Oregon, and Florida State, on their 3rd string quarterback, Jordan Travis, their starter at the beginning of the year and for most of the year, went out a couple weeks ago. And then the dude, I can't remember his name, but he gets concussed, and they're on their 3rd string quarterback, and they beat Louisville, who was actually ranked pretty high, right?
I don't know how high they were ranked, but I just remember looking at the preview of that game and being like, if Florida State doesn't take care of business here, I'd be shocked, because Louisville's not that good. Whether they're ranked or not, they're not that good.
I want to say, I could be wrong, I think that might have been, let's pull it up. I think, Louisville was ranked 15th.
Okay, that's pretty
or 14th.
good.
I'm sorry. Yeah, like they're I guess they're 4. I don't know. I'm trying to do this thing with this camera, and it's blocking part of the screen. So anyways, they're ranked high is the point. It wasn't too bad. They're an undefeated team from a major conference. But because of, so there's like, I called my friend on the Florida, I was driving to a comedy show, and I called a buddy of mine who's a somewhat degenerate gambler, and we were talking about the playoff scenarios. And it seemed really obvious to me that there was going to be some pretty tough choices to be made. We kind of wrote off the idea that Florida State wouldn't get in, but I pretty much, I think that this is my take. I think they got it right. And people are going to not like that.
Yeah.
I think they got it right.
It's problematic because subjectively you look at Florida State and you say they're down to their third quarterback. Their Jordan Travis is an amazing quarterback who, if he's healthy, we're not even having this debate. Florida State's in the playoff, no questions asked if they're undefeated and they have their regular quarterback. But subjectively, you look at that team after they lose their quarterback and you say they're not going to be one of the best 4 teams. If we put them in this playoff, in all likelihood, they're going to get smashed. However, you cannot play a regular season and let a team go undefeated and then say they're not one of the, if they're a Power 5 team, they're not one of the best 4 teams, or at least don't deserve the opportunity to prove that they're one of the best 4 teams. And that's what they really lost out on.
So the problem I have with that,
one-loss Alabama team, the one-loss Alabama team is just, if it wasn't Alabama, maybe people would be more okay with it. But because it's Alabama, a perennial darling of the media that gets in to the college football playoff with 1 loss, it looks bad. But I agree with you. I do agree with you that the ACC this year was garbage. I watched them beat a Clemson team earlier this year. Clemson's not very good this season, and they barely squeaked by Clemson. There's nobody else in the ACC that they play that's really worth a damn. So you have a real conundrum, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that look at Washington and say, well, they didn't play really anybody either, just simply because they don't watch any West Coast football, where I think the Pac-12 might be the best conference in football, even though
possible.
People don't agree with that.
But the problem with the Pac-12 being the best conference in football is that the Pac-12's best wins were against the Pac-12. And by the way, that's not that's not unique. Michigan's out-of-conference schedule sucked. It's honestly a mistake by Texas and Alabama to play the game they played in their non-conference schedule. It's a fucking mistake because one of those teams, like Georgia didn't play anyone, Michigan didn't play anyone, Ohio State didn't play anyone. Also, the fact that Ohio State didn't get any consideration for that 4th spot, it seemed like that was like a foregone conclusion. If you're going to put a 1-loss team in, I thought they deserved to be in the discussion, and I think that they were 7th. I believe, watching the selection show. Oh, no, maybe Georgia was 7th.
This is why, just college football in general and even the 14 playoff was always kind of a joke because it still creates so much subjectivity. And we'll have these same debates when they switch to a 12-team playoff next year.
I don't think it'll be as... Here's the reason I don't think so. And I or not as bad.
It won't be as bad because you'll be talking about a 2 or a 3-loss team.
There's nobody that thinks a team that could have won the championship doesn't make the NBA playoffs. You know what I mean? There's no version of the NBA playoffs where people are like, you left a contender out. There's fucking over half the league gets in to the NBA playoffs. And that's, by the way, I would rather see a big playoff. The limitation in football is you got these kids that are playing for free, putting their bodies on the line, and then you're going to ask them to do it again against the best players in the country, like take the biggest beating of their careers. So adding another game is tough, but I'm like, I think 12 will be a lot harder to justify. Like, right now, if you look at the teams that are ranked 13th and on, how many of those teams do you think have a legitimate stake and a legitimate argument that they could win a championship?
Yeah, it's just like with basketball and the NCAA tournament. It's like we're debating about the 65th best team in the country. So who really cares? Yes, there are every year someone comes out with a list of snubs, and there's always.
But it's not exactly that. It's like you're really debating like the 48th best college basketball team.
Yeah, I get it.
Because of the at-large bids and all that shit.
Right. Even still, it's minutia at that point. No one cares. No one cares that Washington basketball, who you didn't see a game of all year, didn't make it. It's not as big of a deal. With the 14 playoff, when they switched from the BCS system to the college football playoff, the 14 playoff was going to help end some of the subjectivity that really permeated the sport. And it really never did that. There's still so much subjectivity that goes into selecting 4 teams to be in this thing, as we've seen this year, that it creates these debates. Like, you had to know that there was always the potential that 4 teams in a single season could go undefeated, and then you have this problem of who to put in when there's these clearly very good one-loss teams that their one loss is to a team that is, another top 10 program, and they're just as good as.
But let's also be clear, it wasn't 4 undefeated teams. It was 3 undefeated teams because unless you count Liberty, because Texas got in.
Sorry, Liberty.
Hey, listen, I'll say a thing about Liberty, and it's my way to defend conservative bullshit. That's not what I'm doing here. I don't think that you should put a program. This is ultimately where we're going to get to another point that I want to make, but I think everybody that's in Division 1, I can't keep up with what it's called anymore. Is it It's FBS, right? FBS is
Football Bowl subdivision.
God, what a fucking bull! I hate that. Just D1.
It's bad PR.
The ones that are in the top division of college football, if you're in that division, you should be eligible to make the playoff. And in a 12-team playoff, I don't have a problem giving a spot to Liberty. It would be insane in a 4-team playoff to put Liberty and Florida State in over Texas and Alabama. I don't think anyone's arguing that. Especially, obviously, the Liberty is the more egregious of those arguments. But I think we're at a point where it's like, to me, you go, okay, so Alabama made the mistake of playing Texas. Texas loses to Oklahoma. So Alabama's loss is another playoff team. They win the SEC, which East Coast biased or not, that's arguably the best conference in college football. You look at that. That's a tough conference.
You don't have to even explain it. We all agree.
You said the Pac-12 was the best, so I was giving you a little bit of grace.
I think in this year you could argue that they might be, but
it's always you always have to make an argument for the Pac-12. Nobody looks at the SEC and goes. So to me, if you're gonna have this thing that is supposedly the 4 best teams in college football, and you're not going to include the SEC champion or the other team that was in the SEC championship, I don't know if that's the 4 best teams. And I think there's an argument. Frankly, I love Washington. I'm so happy they're in there. I was worried up until they beat Oregon that there was going to be, and Florida State, basically up until they jumped Florida State. If they don't jump Florida State, that could have happened to Washington. They end up number 2 because that was like an easy decision after Georgia lost, and make it number 2, make it number 3, doesn't matter, let them in. Yeah. But I was worried that exact thing was going to happen to Washington.
Yeah, I mean, there was always the potential with Washington, but luckily enough teams found their way into the loss column that it didn't plague them in any way.
Because I don't really think that committee thinks Washington is the second best team in the country, by the way.
No, I think that was just the easy choice because most of that committee probably hasn't even seen Washington play more than once this year.
Of course. And it was probably on Friday.
I heard someone talk about this with the precedent being set. Everyone always talks about the precedent. It's unprecedented that you didn't include this 13-0 Power 5 team in the 4-team playoff. It's unprecedented. But the precedent being set here goes away next year with the change to the 12-team playoff. And I think somebody mentioned that because that precedent is going away, you could do the unprecedented this year because next year it would be completely washed away with the change to the whole setup. And I think that gave them the freedom to do it. If you're still doing the 4-team playoff next year and you don't include Florida State this year, you've really created a problem for yourself down the line because now you've basically created chaos out of the system you have in place. But because you are doing away with the entire system after this season, you can do whatever, you can create the chaos now. And next year, it won't even matter. Because
it's gotten darker in your house, and your the tonal shift has made you seem like a real evil dictator. The system is changing.
I'm just going to pull my hat down and not even make eye contact. Yeah. No, it gave them the freedom to make that choice and omit Florida State, whether you think it's right or wrong. As we were sitting here, I got a notification on my phone that Ron DeSantis, on behalf of Florida State, rips the college football playoff. Could you imagine like getting ripped by tiny little Ron DeSantis in his heel lifted shoes because you left out Florida State? You'd be like, I don't know, man. Sorry, I guess.
Can I do the unprecedented and pee in the middle of this topic? I got to pee so bad.
Well, let's wrap it up because I got.
Oh my God! All right, that's how it ends. Then is me having to piss. It ends in the same unsatisfying fashion as Florida State's season.
Yes, just piss and vinegar. look, we have a whole month before these bowl games, the big bowl games.
I think we were going to say we have a whole month before our next podcast, and that was going to make me laugh so hard I would have pissed my pants.
Talk about the actual games.
Yeah, true.
Like Washington and some of these other teams that we really need to touch on. So for now, I think we are in a good place.
All right. Casey McLean Comedy, Alex SSN, we love you. Bye. Also, by the way, CaseyMcLeanComedy.com works now. All right, bye. All right, I gotta piss. I can't take it.
I'll see you later, man. Bye.
Bye.